terrorist is such a hard term. Let's say
on tape, thankfully. Yes. Hey everybody, this is Spinnerack, and Mars is on tape. Trying to waffle out of it. Trying to waffle.
Welcome everybody back to Spinnerack. Today we're going to be doing a different show. It's a little bit more political. We're talking about the crazy riots that happened out in DC. That's right. The city of DC was invaded. The Capitol was taken over for a brief time. The Capitol building was invaded itself also. The House of the People was forced to endure this disgusting issue that occurred. So I'm right here with my boys, PD and Cal, and we're going to just discuss a little bit about it, give our opinions and what we think should happen or why this happened. So I'm going to pass it on to my boy, PD, since he has a lot to say on this. Go forward. Just remember that we're all Americans and we need to be sensitive to one another in these times, you know?
I'm sensitive to the people that were watching it in horror on January 6th to have to see our Capitol building be paraded over with those rowdy, riotous terrorists.
Remember I called you to tell you about it? Remember I called you to tell you about it? Don't forget that.
Yes, he did. That's the thing. I was doing whatever, sitting around for work or waiting for work. And I think I probably said something very nonchalantly while he was telling me, like, it's just another march. Like, no, look on TV now, right now. So since I don't have regular TV, I had to go to YouTube. I went to NBC, where then Mars said, no, go to CBS. You got better pictures on CBS. And they did. CBS had a lot of the graphic stuff that was going on there because I think, and on NBC, they were kind of showing them standing around in the wide shots, but then CBS was replaying some of the fights and stuff that was going on there. And also slowly starting to show like people being let in. So it was getting very confusing ideas of what was going on. But then you see people breaking into windows, a lot of the flags. This would be, they've tried to, in the past days, we've gotten, what is it, in like maybe 4 days past, and they've tried to turn it into, 3 days past to turn it into Antifa, these non-Trump things. But we know this was a march that started, regretfully, it's the Save America March, and that started with Trump. The speech they said they were gonna walk to the steps, and they did it. They only thought Trump was going to be there with them, but they walked after the march over to there, and it was total bedlam. And you see some of the fights, we see some of the police allowed people in, but ultimately they got into the building. At some point you see them taking selfies with the cops. At some point you see them fighting in the building. You see them breaking windows. You see the flags up on the scaffolding. Everything that's going to happen when all the places Biden's going to be when he's inaugurated, they were all over there. So it's a sad sort of thing to see. And for them to just be sitting there, the police and the police presence not seen till the talk of the curfew that happened before 6 o'clock. So 5:30, you see them pushing them out of the building. You see them, then once it gets to 6, they're getting off the steps, and then they're pushing them to the streets and pushing them further and further. And of course, the aftermath is there's a big wall set up outside of the Capitol building. And we're not sure how the inauguration is going to look, and how many people they'll even allow into anywhere near the Capitol building after this. So it was a terrible day, a terrible thing for people to see on television.
What's your take on it, Cal?
For me, there was one moment that crystallized it for me, and there's somebody climbing up the side of the Capitol building, taking down the American flag and replacing it with a Trump 2020 banner. And that had me more incensed than just about anything else that I saw, because that crystallized exactly what this was about. It wasn't about free speech. It wasn't about being heard or listening. It was about what we want. Okay, it was about keeping this dude in power after he had been whipping them up for weeks. That moment right over there just, again, it crystallized everything for me. It's I don't know. It's a horrible moment. It's a horrible moment in American history where you have, something that only the last time something like this happened, it was from a foreign country. And here you have somebody whipping up Americans against their own government for no reason, again, for no reason other than he's playing them towards his longevity in terms of politics, in terms of business, whatever it may be. But that moment right over there, that's definitely one for the history books, because you can't wipe that one away. You can't come over here and say Antifa or any of these other people at this point, because those guys were never about keeping you in power. This isn't some big whole setup at the end of the day. It's a horrible moment. It's a horrible moment in American history, and one that is self-inflicted because it was so self-indulgent for years. People have allowed not just Trump, but anything aligned with it to just continue. And now it's out of hand, and you got to try to control it. Now you've got to try to control Twitter. Now you've got to try to control YouTube. Now you've got to try to control Facebook. And people have been saying, look, these guys have just been running rampant for the longest time, hiding under free speech. I'm like, look, you can't yell fire in a crowded room. Now, when they see just how close this is to sedition, what if they had been successful in getting onto the House floor, okay, and actually getting people? If they had actually gotten senators or representatives, okay, or some of the top people, they were running around there with plastic cuffs. What if these guys had actually been able to execute what they wanted to do? What were people going to say then? And the worst thing about it is that they're still trying to make those same excuses where Trump has whipped these people up, and it's only 12 more days. Just let them stay there, for 12 more days at the end of it. So everybody agrees this is a horrible act that he's responsible for, but let's let him stay there. Let's let him stay there at the end of the day. It's just a horrible moment in American history.
I mean, I have to concur 100%, but this is really an expression, the final act of something that's began the minute Trump got on that escalator and went down those stairs. When that happened, I thought, hey, when he was running for president, this may actually be a good thing, because there's a lot of people who watch his shows. You have a mixed audience, a diverse audience that watches it, contestants that are diverse, and this guy may be able to bring different groups of people together. I can see the populist touch with him, but he slowly, I don't want to say slowly, he totally went left on that, from the vilifying of the Mexicans and certain groups and the wall. And I mean, that people were saying from then, hey, this guy's dangerous. He shouldn't be allowed to do the things he's doing. And everybody's like, nah, give him a chance. Probably he'll mature once he, when he runs through the primaries. He's not going to be able to say this stuff. But he won the primaries. And they're like, he's going to go for the election. No one's going to go for this. And he won the election. And we're like, okay. I said, once he's in power, he's going to calm down. He never did. And the loss of the election just really, I mean, even before the election, you had the whole thing where, because of the pandemic, some of the state governors, particularly Whitmer in Michigan, where at one point she was besieged. They were besieging the Capitol there. People were bringing guns and stuff like that, and he was supporting it, getting rid of Whitmer. And then it came to a fact that we found out there was an investigation that they were successfully able to prevent people trying to abduct her and assassinate her. And now you have this whole thing with, I mean, there are many other things, but to me, this comes to the point where now, when he lost the election, one thing American democracy has always been good at is at the very end, you realize, after the rhetoric and the fighting of to win the election, the person, the other side concedes. That shows the maturity in the election. We're not some little banana republic, and I'm not dissing any countries, but I'm just saying there's some countries who are immature in terms of how they look and respond to elections. But the very fact that he's done that, and the very fact that he's been enabled throughout this whole process by members of the Republican Party, over and over again, with his rhetoric, with actions, has been a shameful process. I mean, it's just been entirely disgusting. This would not have gotten away as far as if there weren't others who were also contributing to it, who were also allowing it to go through. No one stood up. I mean, the only, there's probably been others, but one of the most prominent guys on the Republican side has been Mitt Romney, who has condemned this, not this act alone, but I'm saying condemned Trump on a number of different occasions. And again, this is the accumulation of everything at the end right now. The very fact that he took these people who were protesting, they were at that meeting that he brought together everybody in Washington, D.C. But then when he told them to go down to the Capitol building, march, and I will be marching with you. Where Rudy Giuliani was like, this is going to be combat, where people were egged on because this is going to be a fight. And they go there because they've been following and believing the rhetoric that this election was stolen, even though only 74 million people voted for him. While yes, the second highest amount ever, 78 million people, or even more, almost close to 80 million people voted for Biden. It's irrelevant, and so what's been happening from his language, from these conspiracies he's done, he's been able to whip people to go into this frenzy. And let's make sure we understand, it's not the vast majority of Republicans. So a lot of them seem to think because of the rhetoric he's had, the election's been stolen, but it's a small minority who've been radicalized or been allowed to give their base desires fruit, and they've been able to act on it because of who he is and what he's been doing. So this is what we see right now. I mean, it's totally 100% shameful. It's just absolutely disgusting,
One of the things, I guess there's two backdrops of the Senate hearing that was, no, that's the Senate, the vote that was going on, and then the actual reading of the electoral votes was happening on the same day. And it's kind of two things, both of those got overshadowed by this. And it also dismantled the plan of questioning everything that Trump has been asking for, questioning this election, questioning those electoral votes, which the Republican senators were ready to sort of to do. And then that killed the whole thing. So it's like, it's called this kind of conspiracy theory, which worked totally in the reverse of what they would have wanted to say. Here's the thing. This is like, let's just take action instead of saying, let the people that are in, I don't want to say this, they're in his pocket, play politics and question that. I didn't want them to, but then when they got in there and they was reconvened around 8 p.m. Next thing you know, they all had to basically just confirm, which they were supposed to do in the first place.
No, but they did. They protested 2 states, Arizona and Pennsylvania. So they did do it. There were still some hardcore members who wanted to do that. They didn't go to Georgia and some of the other states. But the very fact, after this attack, we figured they'll withdraw these crazy accusations and support. They didn't. And they didn't do as many as people were expecting them to do. But because it took them several hours. They didn't finish till like 1 o'clock in the morning or 1:30 in the morning.
They had all speeches. They had all those speeches of talking about the event too.
So it's the thing here is that you.
Well, wait a second. We can't. Who was it? The speaker who was there from Oklahoma, and then the Georgians, the Senator Kelly, who lost. Those are two people that were supposed to, speak against, like question this. Right. And they had that would have been a big start for it to, if that happening. So
it shouldn't even have happened. This is a procedural thing, because let's remember the states have certified, and one of the things Republicans have always been a strong believer in the states' rights. So the states had these elections, the states certified these elections, and therefore, you're going to go say now you're going to go to the House, and the Senate, and you're going to say we're going to throw out the will of the people for these states. That's crazy. That's not democracy, and that's a problem there, So I don't want to overrule, but Cal, what's your thought on all this?
I thought I gave my thought on all this.
Do you want to inject more, Cal?
No, I'm good.
Well, we solved it again.
But what do you think should be? So here's a question. So what do you think should be? Now we're coming up. What should be done with Trump? There's a couple of questions here. Should the 25th Amendment be invoked?
Yes.
Should Pence try and do something to change this whole with the 25th Amendment, or in reality or de facto, should there be an impeachment? What are your thoughts on this, Cal?
Yes. I mean, but we already know the Republicans are craven. These guys have been seduced by Trump's following. I remember talking with Petey. I was like, this is like you see like 10 lions out there. You're like, wow, this would be so great if I get those lions. I could have them. I could control this whole area. Nobody will be able to attack me. But you seem to forget they're lions. You can't control them. And this was the situation where Trump was willing. Trump was this guy who didn't have the shame or the qualms or the morals. So he was willing to go and say whatever, in order to keep these guys, in order to get these guys on him. He was speaking to all of these deep-seated conspiracy theories, but he had been stoking these people from like 2012 with that Obama isn't born in this country stuff. So these guys already looked at him as one of us. Those guys way out on the fringe. And a lot of these Republicans looked at his following like, man, they're so rock solid. They stay with him regardless of anything. But you had to be willing to do what Trump was willing to do. Now you look at the situation and these guys still don't get it. They still look at it like, well, we got so many people who voted for him and this is the Republican base. Like, no, that's not your base. Those are fanatics. And you need to tell people that they're wrong, okay? And this isn't it. But they don't want to do that because they don't want to take any hit. Like, oh, well, I may want to run for president one day. You want to be president of these fanatics? Okay, oh, I don't want to lose my, seat in the Senate. Better you lose your seat in the Senate than we have to come over here and start putting down seditious acts all across the country that are being, from what I'm looking of it, organized, visibly organized at the end of the day. So yes, the 25th Amendment, they should have done it already, but they're not going to do it because they don't have the courage. Forget our political will. They just don't have the courage to do it because they're still chasing after power. Yes, he should be impeached. And then you put that out there, okay, and let it go to the Senate. And then if these guys in the Senate are like, well, I don't want to, it's only going to be 12 days, let them at least be on record saying that, what, nothing that Trump could do for me was worthy of him being removed from office. Not soliciting information from a foreign government, not whipping up sedition, nothing. Okay, and then vote him out.
What's your take on that, Petey?
I mostly agree. And I also think looking at the action that, the social media sites have had to take at this period is after all this time when they, it's obviously revenue is lost, not having him say all the crazy stuff that gets retweeted over and over again, having to say the line, and it's not, it's not hurting his freedom of speech. They're saying, you can't do it here. And then if there is a little bit of cyberbullying saying somewhere else saying, well, you can't do it here and here, but these platforms are basically saying on my platform, you can't do it because it incited too much craziness and they allowed it to go on for too long. So if they have they finally are hurting their bottom line, then the Republican Party should also take a stand and say, at least, even if it takes us till the end of, end of his actual, to the 20th, we did say something and we did say we didn't like any of this stuff that led to this moment. Because it's not one day, it's not like a mistake. It's not like, hey, we didn't know this was gonna happen. This has been building for a while and they've been kind of saying, well, they don't do this. That's sort of the rhetoric. They, these protesters, they're not like, they're not violent. They get a little rowdy, but it was some negativity in there, and he just sort of built it up even bigger, and then helped it along with even his comments of saying, go home, I love you, that sort of stuff. It's like he's still sort of in their corner. When ultimately, I think it would have been, even though it wouldn't have saved them, I think him going out there, but him in the bunker. But I think ultimately they're trying to keep clamps on him in the White House. They're trying to keep him under wraps so he can't really do much or say much. So.
Look, I kind of agree with both of you on your points. Look, I don't think the 25th Amendment is going to work, because the cabinet is basically like a board of directors in most companies where you pick your boys, your friends to be on that. So it's going to be hard to get half of them to agree to it, along with the vice president. It has to be pretty egregious for something like that to happen. And even I think this qualifies. But again, these are his boys, and they are people who were picked because they have similar ideas or beliefs. When Trump first came into office, he had a cabinet foisted on him. He had to use basically a lot of the Republican Party members and stuff like that. But over the course of 4 years, a lot of those guys were replaced or left. We have an acting attorney general. We have an acting head of DHS. We have an acting head of, it looks like we're at education and transportation right now. So there's a lot of people who are not there anymore. So I didn't think that was going to necessarily work. There is word that there's like de facto, they're just ignoring the president because there's 11 days left. I'm not sure, but that's what I'm being told. In terms of the impeachment, if the impeachment can prevent Trump from running for office again, I think I'm all for it. If this is going to be some crazy, I'm not sure whether the Republicans are going to go for it. I think secretly several of them want him to go because they want him to be kicked out of the party, but they don't want to, like the Mafia Don, they don't want to be the one who sticks the knife into the guy because then his supporters will go after him. Just like they're talking about hanging Mike Pence because he didn't follow what Trump said. So I totally understand the need to do the impeachment. I don't think it should be stopped. Let's let the democratic process go forward. I think at the very least it'll give a big mark on his record where this is the only president to ever be impeached twice. Even if it doesn't go through, that should be something that when the history books look and say this guy definitely wasn't one of the better presidents. Now in terms of the media companies, I got to say they're complicit too. And the reason it is that I go back to when Trump got coronavirus, right? And people have been saying this for a long time. People were saying, yo, Trump, we hope you die, and all that kind of stuff. And Twitter then started banning those sentiments, those tweets and stuff like that, and some of the other social media. And AOC said, hold on a second. We've been getting death threats and very negative language towards us for years, and Twitter and Facebook have done nothing. We've been asking for help with this, and yet the president gets it right away. And so what I'm saying, there was a double standard there where for him, he got the benefit. And because he was bringing a lot of money, I guess, for them, people using their messaging services. And also because, they were afraid he's the president. He can do whatever he wants to, they're afraid he'll, cause legislation or regulation or investigations into them. So they were, less likely to do anything. Now the president's on the way out and they're feeling a little bit more emboldened. They're saying this is what's happening. Would they have done this if it was the middle of his term? I'm not sure. It seems obvious they should have. But I think what we need to do here in the States is that we need to somehow bring down the rhetoric where people are saying these crazy things, these crazy conspiracy theories, where people can say anything and there's no action. Oh, it's free speech. No, it's free speech. Like Cal said, doesn't mean you can say, I want to kill this person. This building is being burned. No, that's not the way it should be. It really shouldn't. You may dislike someone. You may not want to be with them. You may not want to say a lot of things, but the rhetoric has just grown to such a proportion that it's made us more divided ever. I remember when I was in school, we had a question. I had a question to one of my professors, and I said, hey, can we stay together as the states? Because, there's so much rhetoric from the right and there's so much rhetoric from the left, it just seems as though we're different people, different values, different things. And he's like, no, there's one thing that keeps us all together. We're Americans, because at the end of the day, we have a shared belief that, whoever the president, we may not necessarily like him, but we will respect him in his office and go forward. And Trump hasn't been able to do many of those things. He's used it as a bully pulpit to bully people, and these media companies have allowed him to whereby the original filters, like the big major TV channels, would have filtered many of the things that he would have said or done. He's been able to say whatever the hell he wants to say on Twitter, whatever the hell, and have it reposted and stuff. And
he was good for their bottom line.
Of course. And he was good for their bottom line on CNN and MSNBC. You got to call it, because people, and I've said it before, because he is such good TV, it makes the people who hate him watch and the people who love him watch. So now they're getting even more revenue coming through. If he wasn't around, he's made millions, hundreds of millions for these organizations. Hell, he should probably ask for 10% of whatever they get, including the newspapers too. And this goes along with some other people when they have these type of things. They're vilified, oh, they're horrible, but yet they're making so much money on people reading and watching this stuff. The best thing for Trump is just to turn off the light, close the door, and call it a day, and let him just die out slowly in the dark. No one will ever hear from him again. That would work, but no.
You also have to worry about the pardon, the self-pardoning, that sort of thing. Exiting with some pardons on his back. Hey, I got to take some of these with me. Get out of jail free cards.
Well, I think you have to have some idea there's going to be some type of investigation or something possible. I think for his kids and his family and his friends, probably Rudy Giuliani is going to get off too. He can do that, but for himself, I don't know about that. I mean, you got to have some serious cojones to say, yo, no one's ever done it, but I'm going to pardon myself because no one's ever done it, And again, that may be one of the reasons he pushed the Supreme Court to take Ruth Bader Ginsburg's seat, because he wanted to pack it with people who he hoped would support him. They didn't support him in the election because those crazy unfound 60 cases the judges he helped to put in, they were all thrown out.
The guy that's not even if he was at least let's say transparent. He said he was putting these people on the courts because he was going to need them later. He said it.
Yeah.
No, the trouble they have is, look, you have the media came out, and this guy Trump was good for business every single day, because this guy was doing something. It was either he was doing something every day, or people were still trying to find out what the hell was going on from yesterday. So he was just excellent, you know. And these guys, as much as they may have not liked this and that about him, he was good for numbers. You know, you would look at MSNBC, you would look at all these other places, they would have excellent ratings based on, based on Trump. It would remind me of what was going on with Fox News when Obama was in office. When Obama was in office, it was like all Obama all the time on Fox News. And he was great for the ratings because they would hit him every single day, and guys who didn't agree with them would come in here and tune in. Trump, however, was good for everybody, because there was the people who supported him, the people who didn't, and these guys were tuning in. And they never had they never had the morality to say, look, we're helping this dude, okay, enable these other people. It wasn't that, hey, you have free speech to say something. You're helping someone to embrace something that isn't true. You're helping someone to go and try to actualize a lie. And then when it happens, there's no substance based on it. You have these idiots coming to the floor like, what's this guy, Ted Cruz? And he's saying, well, there's like so many millions of Americans who don't believe that this election was free and fair. We have to do something about that. And you're like, well, why don't they believe that, Ted Cruz? Because you told them. You told them. You didn't give them any information. You told them that it's not free and fair, and they believe you. And now you're saying we need to investigate. We're going to investigate what you said. We're going to investigate you. And everything was a play for what? It was a play for power. It was a play for money. It was a play for ratings. And now what are you going to do? And even then, even now, you still have these cats over here who are still trying to say, okay, is there some way we can get rid of him, but still keep his followers so I can somehow have a chance of being president, next time? And it's like, no, clean break, dude. Clean break. If you want, some cats out over there, you have to give them credit. They're like, no, nay, never. I don't want anything to do with this, and I don't want anything to do with these people. Then you got these Lindsey Graham types over here who are saying, you know what, it's enough, I'm out. Yeah, they only had to light the building on fire for him to get out. So, going forward, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. The most important role, I think, of any office right now is going to be the Department of Justice going forward. Because if these guys can come over here and wreck shop like they did for 4 years and there's no penalty, then they'll just do it again, or they'll keep doing it. And they're going to hide under the rights that we've been given in order to have certain freedoms, and they're going to abuse them, and they'll just continue to do such. And then eventually you're going to have it'll be even more fractious, because unfortunately most people don't believe that if what I'm doing is right, I have to continue doing this. If you look at the other guy and saying, well, he's getting away with it, they're like, well, I'm not being an idiot and doing it this way. I'm going to do it this way. So going forward, these guys are going to have to say, look, you had your ratings and such, but you're going to have to, go cold turkey. And you have to find, you're going to have to find some other way to exist without this dude, because it doesn't work long term.
Yeah, I can definitely see that there. But so the question I really say is like, what do you think? And you just have to say one or two things. What do you think needs to be done going forward? What's the answer to help reduce the rhetoric, reduce the fire in the storm? With the new upcoming.
Stop lying to people.
Huh?
Stop lying to people.
That's it. What about you?
Yes. You stop lying to people. If you come to me and you're saying, well, you know what? If I go to you and say, I think PD stole you. I think PD, stole your car, and it's not true. Okay. And then you're like, PD stole my car? Yeah, I think PD stole your car. PD stole your car. And it's a flat out lie. Okay. And I enable you you're going after PD. And I was like, why did you steal my car? He's like, what are you talking about? And he's like, well, he said you stole my car. And I'm like, well, yeah, PD, you stole his car. And we just keep with it. Eventually, you're going to believe it's true, even if it's not true. You're going to act on it as truth, even if it's not true. That's the biggest thing, because you have 4 or 5 years of people being lied to daily, repeatedly. Okay. And no matter what anybody else said, like, no, look at this information here. It's not true. They always came back. There was always some counter, and the counter was always another lie. At no point did people take any responsibility and say, no, we're not going to do this type of stuff. Now and this is the result of it. Okay. They attacked the Capitol based on what? A lie that somehow Mike Pence could overturn this election. that somehow this election wasn't free and fair, that they were robbed. You know, everything that they did was based on a lie. But they had been stoked for weeks, even before the election went down. Trump was, what was the thing that Trump was offering his people? If we win, fine. If we lose, we were robbed. And that was, I mean, it's a ridiculous platform for anybody to base their actions on, but that's what they were sold, and they were continuously fed it. And the fruition of it was what we saw at the Capitol.
What do you think, Petey?
Well, I think the hard part going forward is that there's a regime change and then there's a split in the Senate. So it's going to be the news finding their heart in a time when we needed them to find their heart for Trump, to kind of push back on the rhetoric and say things, even though there would be statements saying that, like him using the fake news thing, knowing that the news kind of condenses, trims, and sometimes they don't have all the facts. He kind of caught them with their pants down while he was giving them false information at the same time. So it's like, hey, I'm calling you guys out for your mistakes, and they'd be like, oh, and then he would add his own fake stuff, and then they wouldn't be like, well, what can we do? He's just making statements. We'll just say, we'll just show we're smarter, and it's not true, and no one believes it. But now with now with Biden in there, and you have they're gonna be wanting to, act like they're tough again, and that's the hard part of it, where we needed them to stand up. They're gonna act like, well, post this event, we're gonna be more mindful. It's like, no, we watched that day. We watched you take your time and wait for it to be declared a riot before you said that it was, when you'd already seen stuff that we hadn't saw. We didn't see. We didn't see some of the stuff of some of the fights that are going on earlier through the 3 to 6 time, and it's like, and we seeing the smoke bombs, like these guys are prepared for that, and they're not talking about what's going on inside the building at the same time. So they're basically waiting till we're allowed, so they know everybody has the same information. Let's say it. So it's like, now we get the Dems in there, and they'll be like, hey, why aren't you guys doing this? What are you guys doing about that? What are you doing about this? No, let me ask you the same question again. Same question again. And it's like they totally, the lack of a better term, I won't say the other ones, they want to be pimp slapped all around. Like he just was like treating them, like they were nobodies all the time, into their faces. And they called him on some heavy things, and he was able to sideswipe as if they, like he actually had some actual moves when he didn't. He just did the basic, you're an idiot thing to a lot of reporters when they brought up all the stuff he said about women and all that stuff. And he just like, maybe I did, maybe I didn't. And then they would just move on. He realized, he showed that they had no heart. Now they'll find it. So I'm sorry, I went too long. But it's like, I think that they're still playing the same game. They always do. They find their hearts on sometimes. So like on in New Orleans with the whole, with everything that was going on, it took them a while, but they finally started saying this, saying the right things, but it takes them a while to do it. So, and same for the social media things, but they still want to see they're still interested in seeing what does the president think, rather than saying, once it goes left, cut the tape. When they see him on the thing and he's saying something, like, drag him off there, saying, get that guy off of here. You hear what he's saying? That's what you're supposed to do. Cut him. It's going left.
I think that I see your point too. I see you guys. One of the things we had with Trump is that he connected with people. I don't know necessarily intellectually, but he connected with people on a level, on various levels of various people at different times. But particularly, it seems like the working class he connected pretty well with. I think that the very fact that Biden won 306 to he beat Trump by the same amount of electoral votes that Trump won against Hillary Clinton just shows you how divided the country is. Yes, he has the popular vote, Biden, but the electoral vote was pretty slim, and unfortunately, it shows that there's a big divide. That we have to, if you're a Democrat, you have to do more to reach out to those in other states and in other circumstances to try to get them into the tent. And unfortunately, this economy has not necessarily always been very strong, good to people of the working class. You know, if you have a job that you can work from home, that's great. But, you know, look at those millions of people who were out of jobs from, you know, restaurants and hotels and stuff, who lost money and stuff like that. So, but what I need to say is that in terms of what we need to do going forward is the institutions. I think one thing this showed is that the institutions that we have been stretched, and they've been stretched to the limits, and some of them have actually broken. And what needs to show is that we need to go back to where we say, hey, there are um, certain norms that need to be addressed and followed as a leader of the country, as well as um, certain things like, you know, who can go and do certain positions, what type of qualifications you need. You know, you shouldn't just because you're a friend of the president or because the president feels ideologically a certain way that certain things should be done a certain way. And so those are the type of things that we need to really go back and say, hey, should a president be able to do A or B or C, or is it not expected? So when the election is over and a vote and it's certified, hey, you want to contest it, you contest it through the courts and you lose and the state certifies it, that should be the end of it right there. It can't go any further. You know, hopefully it will stop way before once the winner has been announced. But by the time it's certified by the state in November, that should be the wrap. You know, there should be nothing else. The same thing goes with the different policies and norms that have been existing for many years. You can't just come and say, well, you know what? I'm running the show now, so we're going to do it a whole different way. It has to be something where we come back to that. Because if not, then anybody who takes over can do whatever they want. You know, they can slowly, you know, like in the post office, the board of the post office got packed with Trump's appointees over the years. And it was supposed to be apolitical, but over the years you get it packed because he's there so long and he's able to put whoever he wants in there. The first thing the dude is doing is he's cutting mailing machines and he's cutting overtime so that they can not necessarily count or make it difficult for them to count the votes, the mail-in votes. So things like that. Politicizing a department that shouldn't be politicized is ridiculous. And this is some of the things I think that needs to be addressed, because once we have these things, instead of just being the norm, it becomes codified and say, hey, you can't do this. This is the type of things you're not supposed to do. I would think that would help and make and not politicize institutions that should not be. And the Justice Department, for example, is supposed to be, yes, the president picks the head of the Justice Department, but the rest of the Justice Department has rules and duties that they need to do that are not supposed to be politicized, and that's what they're supposed to do. And we've seen here that constantly, like try to investigate the president's son, try to get an October surprise like he got with Hillary when he was the FBI came out with, hey, we found something in the email. Oh, at the very end, oh, I didn't find anything. But by that time, the job was done. You know, stuff like that is not cool. Good thing that they were able to not do the investigation on Biden's son, though probably they need to look into it now to make sure that everything is up and up, you know. But those are the type of things I'm more concerned about, because I think the institutions, if they get stretched to a point, you know, like our European allies and our Pacific allies, you know, when Obama left, there was a big treaty that they were going to do with many states to try to contain China. Trump came and just ripped it out, like, we're not doing this madness. But then by the end of the time he's leaving, he's in a trade war with China. You know, he's isolated from some of his allies over there. Doesn't make any sense, you know? He's like, we're going to do everything unilaterally instead of doing it multilaterally. You can't have a foreign policy like that, because in the end, your allies are going to say, this guy ain't dependable. We can't sign something and follow through. So that's what I was thinking. So is there anything, fellas, you guys want to talk about, or have we covered all the bases here? Hello.
I think we covered it, unless Cal has anything else to say.
Cal's in agreement with us, so there's no need to ask Cal a question.
So that one part about, you know, we need to, it's not like people didn't know what to do. It's not like people didn't understand that the president nominates someone to this position, but they're supposed to be independent of the president. Everybody knew what to do. They didn't do it. Okay, they kowtow to this dude for the most base, you know, instincts possible, be it political, monetary. They knew exactly what they were supposed to do. You had even cat like Jeff Sessions, who people didn't necessarily have the best opinion of, but Jeff Sessions was new enough to say, look, I can't do this stuff. I have to recuse myself. And once he recused himself, Trump went over here, lambasted him. But Trump did the procedure of, he did Richard Nixon 10 times better. What is it? You won't do it? I'll find somebody who will do it. You won't come out here and be a shill for me and as a press secretary? I'll find somebody who will come out here and say the stuff that I want them to say. And so everybody knew what they were supposed to do. They didn't do it. Okay. And it was, for the most banal reasons at the end of the day. So it's not like we need to learn. I mean, everybody knew what they were supposed to do. It's when Biden comes in, yeah, the Republicans are once again, well, we need to have fiscal responsibility and we can't do these particular things. And they've got to be, their feet have to be held to the fire saying, no, for 4 years, you guys were absent. It's part of the reason I'm happy that the Democrats have the Senate, because these guys need to be able to just move without having to have these guys, Republicans, too involved right now. Because they were absent from all of these things, and now for these guys to come later and say, "Oh, we can't do this, can't do that," we weren't supposed to be doing this now. But they placated this dude. I mean, remember those scenes where you would have inside of they would have these meetings. Everybody would genuflect to this guy. Oh, thanks to the great leadership of President Trump. I'm so happy that you have me here, President Trump. I mean, I've never seen anything like that in the States. So I did want to just respond to that part. It's not that people didn't know what to do; they didn't do it. Okay, and they were after their own personal ambitions. Be they political, be it monetary, whatever it may have been. They decided that those were more important. Those are more important than doing what was right in those situations. And then the people who did what was right. I mean, look at this cat. What was this cat's name? Michael Cohen. Michael Cohen was the same attorney who came over here and was doing all of these things that were bad. He was his fixer, so on and so forth. And then when his feet got held to the fire, he was like, you know what? I got to do, I'm going to have to come over here. I got to plead guilty. I got to do, I don't have to, inform on this guy, so on and so forth. And all the guys who did the wrong thing, what happened? They all got pardoned. Okay, everybody who kept their mouth shut, knowing that they, the information on Trump would have put him in bad jeopardy, they kept their mouth shut. And what did he do? He pardoned each and every single one of them. That's the situation that you're dealing with. Okay, so going forward, that's what needs to be addressed. You do that, we're on firm footing. But if you keep playing this game like you're doing now, well, I'm gonna ride this out and see how it goes for future. Well, let's see how things stand with the people. Well, let's check the poll numbers. At some point, what the right thing to do is, and you didn't do it. You just didn't.
But that's why I'm saying the institutions need to be stiffened. Like what's happened with when Obama was president, when Biden was the vice president, the Republicans had the Senate. They said no, we're not going to put any judges in for Obama, basically. So for 2 years, nothing happened. As soon as Trump comes in, they install 300 judges, federal judges at different levels, and they got 3 Supreme Court judges. Because there's no filibuster anymore. They used the filibuster like crazy, but then when it was their turn, they got rid of it. That didn't seem fair, And the rulings, unfortunately, the Republican Party now is a minority party. In terms of they're not winning the majority vote, and they haven't won it consistently for several presidential cycles, and they still win because they're able to because of the way the electoral college is structured, where every state gets some type of representation. So the point here is that if we don't have norms to help rein in the excesses of some of these guys, what you're going to have is a simple where you have Napoleon comes in, and he's just crowning himself. And you're going to have all the people around him like, oh, he's a great one, and we've seen this, unfortunately. I know The Economist magazine did they do a survey of elections throughout the year, every year. And one of the things you found is that the Western liberal democratic model has been under serious threat, where you have popular people, populists come into power in many countries, such as the Philippines, where you had thousands of people die because of police sweep against drug dealers, but basically it's low-level drug users and dealers who got killed, and political enemies. And you have people in Hungary with this guy Orban, in Poland, where you have this hardcore right-wing dude who basically took over and just changing the rules the way they want. It's not fair. They change the media, they're changing the judges. That impinges on democracy. You should have the ability. I'm all for You win fair and square, you lose fair and square, and you continue onward. That's where the fight's supposed to be. But if you start changing the way institutions are set up and the rules governing them to make sure that your group is constantly benefiting from that, or then it's not going to be fair. And what's that's going to do eventually is going to push one group to a particular situation. And Trump's group, yeah, the reason I think is that they feel alienated from what they see, and rightly or wrongly, we have to come out somehow and reach out and bring them in. Right now, they're looking at the TV and they're getting their news from one source, and we need to probably broaden it out. When the country had 3 networks, and that was basically it. Now we have hundreds of networks. You have YouTube. You have where you can watch whatever you want and basically find similar minds like you, somewhere, somehow, and that becomes dangerous to a degree.
I'm gonna chime into this. I don't want to, jump on what you're saying. I don't think the problem is that even the liberals to the red and blue thing, we for so long have picked a side and looked at it and almost felt, hey, some people say maybe we should split, that sort of thing, when we know that's not really the answer. So I think the hard part is to look at the people on the other. Regretfully, no, we can look at these guys that, during this insurgence as criminals and treat them as such. And then the people at home that are having these issues, though, they just have to understand losing is a part of it, that you vote one way, and if your state goes the other way, your vote is lost, but that's the way it works. It's not someone actively stealing it. It's just the way the Electoral College works. And it's not necessarily wrong. And then when the Democrats lose, when Trump gets in there, we're saying, no, this isn't good. But at the same time, this is the process, regretfully. They're saying that a regular person, American, could become president. And it's not, there is walking, there was talking and protesting and this, that, or people not going to his inauguration. But at the same time, to have this reaction, I don't know. But I think that people look at it too much of the split and saying that those people are crazy, they're dumb, this, that, and the other, all across the board. When there's also, on the same side, moderates that are been on the fence and not been able to vote for Trump because they've been like, don't nominate him. They've been but having the discussion instead of just trying to point out, hey, you're a total idiot. And that excludes the people that are crazy. I have to exclude the people that are doing the terrible stuff.
Yeah, I agree.
So we're talking about people in their houses thinking negatively about the situation and saying, some of it is part of the process that you don't always get what you want. So
losing sucks. Nobody likes it. We all remember the Knicks, dropping that series against Houston. Nobody likes it. Did we storm Madison Square Garden the next day and try to light it on fire? No. No. You have to, that's part of it. That's part of it at the end of the day. So you could go back to the last election. It wasn't like the winners. It wasn't like the Trump people were very gracious in winning. No, they thumbed their noses. They put a finger in the eye. And it wasn't like the losers were necessarily the best losers either. They had their march. They went and they had the march on Washington, the Women's March on Washington, and so on and so forth. And a lot of stuff came out of it. However, those things, to be quite honest, were organic in comparison to whipping people up for 8-9 weeks, telling them that the election was stolen when you have almost the same exact numbers from the first one in terms of the Electoral College. And you're telling people, hey, Georgia was stolen from me, but not everybody else who won or lost. It's just me. It was this magical ballot. Yeah. It was this magical ballot that somehow it was only my name in any of these states, and not all of the states, just the ones that I lost by a certain margin that I needed to win. This guy was, who was he talking? He was talking with the Georgia governor saying, I need you to find me 11,000 some odd votes. Okay, he's literally saying that type of stuff. And why was it Georgia? Because he knew he had no inroads anywhere else. He knew the vote tallies everywhere else. Arizona, Wisconsin. He knew there was no hope for him anywhere else. So he was still trying to lean on this guy at the end of the day. Anybody else, that's the issue I have with it. If any of the three of us were to go jump into a store, okay, and say we're going to come over and protest and so on and so forth, we'd be arrested, if not shot dead. That's how that would work. And then you have these cats over here who are on tape committing, illegal acts, and people act like, well, I don't know what should we do. What should we do? I'm not sure. He's the president. What should we do? You remove him or you impeach him. It's pretty simple at the end of the day. And I do agree with what Petey said. I don't want to get into the whole where we're right and you're an idiot, type of argument, because that never goes far. I don't like it when it becomes, we're right, you're wrong, about something that's not necessarily there. I don't like when it boils down to something, something racial either, because that takes away from the bigger problem that, hey, it doesn't, for me, it doesn't even matter. You just look at the situation. There's nothing about the situation that you need to somehow make a parody with about other protests. You protested here. This was insurrection. Okay, there's no comparison. These are people who were going in there to try to stop the results of an election. That's what they were there for. Okay, if they wanted to protest the vote, they could have done that outside. They didn't need to get on the floor to do that. I just, for me, it's just, I hope people are cognizant of that this wasn't like some teenagers wilding out on a Saturday night, being stupid, and then they went too far. These people went there with one thing in mind, and it was to stop. Okay, it was to stop the transfer of power from one president to another. And Trump and his people were back in their little enclave watching the whole thing, and they thought it was great. They were sitting there listening to Laura Branigan sing Gloria, and everything was cool until some aides told them, no, it's not cool. Even then, they started to be explained to, why isn't it cool? Because it's sedition, sir. Because it's sedition. Well, what's wrong with sedition? The last time we had a civil war based on that. It's one of the biggest moments in our history. So again, I got the TV on in the background. They're showing that scene again where these guys are taking down the American flag and replacing it with the Trump flag. Boils my blood. You've got to understand that this is just basic right. For me, at least, this is basic right and wrong. Okay, you see everything that went wrong, okay, in order to facilitate that particular act. And if you continue doing it, or if you continue pussyfooting around it, you're going to have more of the same. You'll have more of the same at the end of the day. So you got to, you got to put some hard clamps. But I think this was a very hard year because we have these freedoms and nobody wanted to seem like they were stripping people of the freedoms, even if it was in their best interest. We didn't want to tell people not to congregate. We didn't want to force people to wear a mask. We didn't want to enforce any of these particular rules. And what it did, it put everybody at such weak embers, at the end of the day. And then you get this, right? And then you get this at the end of the day. And don't tell me that these people couldn't have done a better job of it, that they didn't have the numbers. When Black Lives Matter people came out there, they had forces all on the steps. I remember I was talking with Petey, and Petey was telling me what was going on, and I wasn't clear on what was going on. I was like, what is Petey talking about? I was like, what are they doing? Like lighting some bonfires or something? And then you go, and I'm like, what are these people doing on the steps? How the hell did they get on the steps? If you've ever been to the Capitol, they won't let you there. Since 9/11, you can't just walk up there. You have to have clearance to get there. And you see them all on the scaffolding, just all spread out. You're like, how the hell did that happen? Okay, and once you see that, you're like, they're going to get in the building. So with an understanding of it's just a case of the ball being dropped from start to finish, and not just over the course of several weeks, but over the course of several years. Okay. However, we're not so far gone that we can't rebuild from this situation, which I hope people are willing to do. But the biggest thing that it starts with is telling people the truth. Okay, not insulting people. Okay, not playing games, not playing identity politics, but just telling the people the truth about the matter, and then having the courage and the intestinal fortitude to stick to it.
You have a lot of faith. That's why I go back to the institutions. But I agree with you with the whole BLM because, many people, I watch a lot of Fox, and, Fox is basically saying they keep bringing up the whole BLM that, oh, these guys were also, the Democrats didn't condemn some of these actions. You're like, what are you talking about? 99% of those protests were peaceful. you had rioters, which are different from the protesters. And they would always constantly say, oh, all the rioters, just because you're protesting. And it's crazy, you know, and they're trying to make a distinction. And here they're trying to say, oh, well, you know, trying to make some type of crazy distinction. But one point I wanted to make was that Stacey Abrams, she lost Georgia for governor by 55,000 votes, right? She came back and she reached out to as many people as possible, and she was able to help win the state for Joe Biden, win the state for 2 senators, you know, in what everybody considered a long shot, you know, in a special election, because no one had, in a runoff election, because no non-Republican had won one in forever, and yet they did it. And so what I'm saying is that we need to start doing that, going to different states and reaching out to different people, and people who normally wouldn't go vote, and getting them to vote and be part of this whole thing. You know, Trump, like I said, was able to connect with people. And look, Florida, a state a lot of people thought was in play the first time, and he won it against Hillary Clinton. The second time, he won it even more. The second time, we need to do those type of things. You know, and if not,
open the line of communication started. You know, that's the thing. Not just say, hey, that's it. You know, we're never going to win these states. They have to go to.
Yeah, I mean, they thought they had a chance in Texas, and they were wrong. They lost, and Georgia was something like, it's a possibility, and Georgia ended up being the one race that actually came through for them.
The Biden campaign, because they were talking about Texas, but I think weeks out, if not months out, you know, if you ask people inside of the Biden campaign, they said, "What about Texas?" And they were telling people Texas is gone. That's why they didn't go there. You know, they gave them some money, but they were looking like, no, it's not going to happen. But they did see something in Georgia. They did see something in Georgia, and they did see something in Arizona. I mean, that's just politics. If you see people actually going there and spending the time there, then they're like, yeah, we got a chance to pull this out. But, and this is the last thing I'll say, because we've been on this for a while, but I like the example that you brought with Stacey Abrams, because Stacey Abrams never, to the best of my knowledge, she never conceded a race or anything of that nature. She went, she ran, and I know she was unhappy about it because the governor was also in charge of the voting. He was also in charge of making these rules. So everybody said this is a conflict of interest. And he was like, no, I can be fair about it. He was so fair that he won. So of course she wasn't happy about it, but she did what we have always encouraged people to do. You know, you pick yourself up. She dusted herself off. And what did she do? She went back. She used the same process. He didn't go out there and start stoking people that the election was fraud. It was rigged. Okay, we need to come over here and storm the Capitol. She organized. She spent 4 years after her defeat. I'm sorry, was it 4
years? 2 years.
How many? How long?
It's 2 years.
2 years. She spent the 2 years in the time that after she lost. Okay, organizing. You know, getting people out. You know, so she could, you know, to improve it, because she said, no, what happened to me is not going to continue to happen. I'm not going to allow that. That's what people are supposed to do. You come out, you lost, okay, fine. You go back, you turn out your vote, okay, you make certain that you reach out to people like you were saying, and that's how you go forward. But this other stuff, no, not here, no.
Yeah. I think that's the best way to sort of put it, rather than going to this thing where it's like, you know, like when we talk about the loss, like Bush winning against Hillary, and people talking about the, you know, process of the electoral college and saying question it and that sort of thing, which Trump did say, you know, he was ready to sue and go through the votes if he'd lost at that and during that election. But the idea of talking about it and then immediately when you lose and then being like, let's prosecute, let's go out, let's do all that stuff, that is nuts. Like the talking about the political process is one thing, but then just immediately saying, we got the proof now, we lost and we shouldn't have lost. It's like, well, how do we lose? And you guys already stated a bunch of times, everyone's gone through the process of the votes and how, you know, airtight it was. And then even on the phone with Trump is putting out his numbers and it's like, no, you know, Mr. President, he's trying to be as nice as he can. It's like, we've gone through these states and there's nothing fraudulent in these states. There's nothing was tabulated wrong and anything like that. And like, he's trying to be nice about it when he's saying, you know, you're wrong, I gotta go. I can't talk anymore. Like, end the call. Because he's going on with your numbers are, I don't know where you're getting them from. It's not, it doesn't, and then you even question these states is just It's just, you know, it's insulting too. It's lies and it's insulting the process. So if you want to talk about it, that's fine. But then to just say, because some people are saying it's a revolution in that crowd, and they really question what was the plan. So, I mean, having that talk and then trying to go back to the past and say, you know, hey. Said we don't like the stuff that George Washington doing, and then well, let's go. Like, no, we're not letting you guys do nothing. Like this, we're getting this. We're getting this United States going, and that's what it is. So I don't know. Stop. You know, we question everything, but not to just sit up there and go and act that sort of thing, and go through the process. If the Democrats suffer through the judges. And then next thing you know, when Trump goes in there and he gets all those judges, and all we did was say, hey, maybe the judges shouldn't be in, the Supreme Court judges shouldn't be in there for life. But that's not saying we got to stop it. It's like, hey, we got to go through the process of talking about that. And it might die a death immediate while they're in there. But just follow the process. I mean, being alive this long, you start to see what the process is a little bit. You can be bothered with it. I get it. But, you know, not go crazy. That's what I'm saying.
So one thing I want to leave before we go, I think we've had a very good spirited discussion on this whole issue, is that when George Sr. lost his election to Clinton, he graciously opened up the White House and brought Clinton in so he could, you know, from the other party after a tough election. The same thing happened when George W. lost, well, he didn't lose the election, but the Republican lost the election. You know, he brought Obama in. And when Clinton lost to Trump, he graciously brought Trump in to do the process. And those are norms that we as a country expect. This is the norms that we expect. And also those presidents who've lost, will attend the inauguration. In this instance, that madness will not occur. Nobody wants Trump to show up. He doesn't want to show up. And I just want to say that if we can get back to that, where you can lose an election and respect your person, that's the way. Even hard-fought. Lindsey Graham won his election, a hard-fought election, and when he went back to the Capitol building, he saw Kamala Harris, who became the vice president, and he fist bumped her on the floor of the Senate. And you're like, what the hell just happened here? You know, he was throwing everything but the kitchen sink at them. And, you know, it's rhetoric and then there's reality, you know? Ruth Bader Ginsburg used to go to concerts with Anthony Scalia, the lion of the conservative right, you know? We just need to get together. You can talk what you gotta talk. You gotta just work together at the very end. Spin rack.
Out.